We are live. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Google Hangout. I'm excited to be here with Gary Renard, who I met for the first time 3 years ago, who was very kind enough to agree to do my documentary. And here I am sitting with him 3 years later to celebrate the awakening of the mind, to celebrate this course that we both enjoy and certainly enjoy talking about. And there's been a lot of changes since I last talked to Gary, and a lot of upcoming new things, including a book, which I'll let him share a little bit of what we can expect. But first, let me just say welcome, Gary. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for making time. I know you've been busy traveling and just came back from China, so it's very well appreciated.
It's my pleasure, Craig. It's always fun to talk about the course.
So as I said, the first time I met you, Gary, was for the movie, the documentary, A Course in Miracles, Enlightenment or Bust, and I'm now releasing it. And I was looking over the footage, and everything that you shared, you probably don't remember what you said, but I promise you, everything that you shared was certainly timeless. And you may not know this, but I'm sure you hear this a lot. Some of the teachers that I interviewed credited you and I include myself as one of them, as being a very pivotal, your book, The Disappearance of the Universe, being a pivotal tool in our awakening with A Course in Miracles.
Well, that always makes me really happy to hear that, and I appreciate it. And I think one of the things that people don't realize about the book is that it helped me the same way that it helps them, because I never would have understood Course in Miracles without my teachers and without that 10-year process that you see that takes place in Maine, mostly during the time that the disappearance of the universe happened. So in a way, you could say that I was taught in the same way that everybody else is when they read the book, and they're simply going through the same process that I did. And it's kind of fun, to meet all these people, because they feel like they know me already because they've read the book, and I haven't had the advantage of getting to know anything about them yet. But that's okay. It's been a lot of fun. It's been exciting. And if you told me back when I first started writing The Disappearance of the Universe that all this would happen, I would be totally surprised, because at that time, in fact, for that entire 10 years, I didn't have any guarantee that people would ever read it. I didn't know if it would ever get published. I didn't know if anybody would actually read the damn thing. So I just did it because that's what I was guided to do. And that's what my teachers told me to do. And for all I knew, it could have just ended up sitting on my bookcase forever without anybody else ever reading it. But that would have been okay too, because at least I would have read it and I would have learned from it. And that would have been good enough for my teachers, I'm sure. But during all the time that they were talking to me, I kind of got the impression that maybe they weren't just talking to me, that maybe they were talking to other people as well. And it did turn out that way, not because of me, because I didn't know anything about the publishing business or anything, but I did meet the right person, whose name was D. Patrick Miller. And he knew what to do. And it turned out to actually get out there and then find its way to a bigger publisher. And because of that, find its way all over the world. So today it's in 22 languages. And I get to go all over the world. And I've basically gotten to see the world for free. So that's been a lot of fun too. So it's been exciting. I get to meet all these great people. And that's been good for me, because I wasn't exactly what you would call a people person. I wasn't someone who would like to put myself out there and speak in front of people and meet all these people. And I've really changed a great deal in that regard. And it's been something that has enabled me to kind of come out of my shell and, get out there and be with people and be with the world. So it's been very good for me personally, and obviously the book has helped a lot of people as well. So it's been a good thing all the way around.
Well, it has been a good thing, and we're getting messages coming in from our listening guests, just sending their love and thanks for all of what we're doing. And so just for the viewers who may not be familiar with the teachers you're referring to, certainly all of us who have read your books know who you're referring to. I would love if you take a moment and just share a little about these teachers and how are these teachers still serving as teaching symbols for you today?
Yeah, it's interesting. Arten and Pursah never really stopped appearing to me or teaching me. That first period of teachings took place over 9 years, and it was 10 years before the book was done. And then all these events transpired, and I didn't see them for maybe 3 years, 4 years. And so that was interesting. And I had the chance to get on this whole new life, teaching the course for the first time. And that's brought up a whole new set of forgiveness opportunities. And I was totally unprepared to, get out there and be confronted by people and have all of these judgments and things to forgive. So it was like a whole new life for me. And I think it was interesting that they stayed away for, I don't know, maybe 3 years or whatever. And then they started appearing to me again, and there was a whole different set of forgiveness opportunities. Now, forgiveness is always the same, but you have to learn how to adapt it. You have to learn how to kind of like take it and apply it to whatever comes up for you. So with the second book, Your Immortal Reality, you can see them help me, forgive this whole new set of problems that have been handed to me. You think that when you become successful, that's going to solve your problems, right? And that's not true. All that it does is it gives you a different set of problems. So then that's what you need to forgive. That's what you need to get used to forgiving. And so that was the second book. And then I started traveling almost an insane amount of time. It's like I was going out for like 40 trips a year, going all over the world. And it was a great experience, but it didn't really give me any time to write. So there was a lot of time in between the second book and the third book. And that, kind of like pissed off some people because they wanted, a new book. People always say, where's the new book? Where's the next book? And I'm saying, well, I got to go to, Malaysia or something. And so it took a long time. And that was a forgiveness opportunity, again, for me, because I didn't realize that, Course in Miracles students who were supposed to be so nice and loving and forgiving and everything, I didn't know that they could be so easily pissed off. So, that's another forgiveness process that I went through. So all these things keep coming up that you need to forgive. And just when you think that you've forgiven everything, then something else will come up. And Arten and Pursah have been kind enough to be there for me when I needed them. And you can see that in all 3 books of the trilogy. And I call it a trilogy because by the end of the third book, what they did was they completed the story of Thomas and Thaddeus, Cindy and me, and Arten and Pursah 100 years from now in Chicago. And it shows how all 3 of those time periods fit together and how it's all connected. It's kind of like the Course says, trials are but lessons presented once again. So where you made a faulty choice before, now you can make a better one and thus escape all the pain that your previous decision has brought to you. Well, I think that the lessons that we're presented with in this lifetime are really the same lessons that we've been presented with before. So that statement about trials being lessons presented once again, I think it happens over and over again in this lifetime, but I think it also happens and is carried forward from one dream lifetime to the next dream lifetime to the next dream lifetime until you learn all the lessons and escape all the pain. Then you don't need a classroom anymore because you've learned all the lessons, and then you're ready to go home. And when it comes to the fourth book that I'm working on, because Arten and Pursah started appearing to me again a couple of years ago, after going a couple of years without, they started again. This book is a little different. It's still the same format. It's still Arten and Pursah, but they don't talk about Thomas and Thaddeus very much. Just a little bit, the same with Cindy and me and Arten and Pursah. They've, pretty much completed that story. And what they do instead is they talk about other masters, other people throughout history who have been enlightened and how they got to be that way. And I think it's a great subject because I've always wondered, like, who was Jesus before he was Jesus? How did he get to be Jesus? Well, who was he that lifetime just before he was Jesus? The same with Buddha. Who was he just before he was Buddha? How did he get to be Buddha? And it's a really interesting subject. And you get a really good picture, I think, of how these people got to be enlightened, how they got to be awakened. So I think the more examples we see of that and the lessons that they had to go through, the more it encourages us and the more it points us in the right direction because we can learn from them.
And so, what has been the most consistent learning when in your writings about them? What's the common thread with all of them that has brought this sense of enlightenment or freedom from suffering?
Well, sooner or later, it's always going to come back to forgiveness. You notice that no matter what Arten and Pursah and I talk about in the books, and we talk about a lot of different subjects, but sooner or later, they always bring the conversation back around to forgiveness because that is the great teaching tool of the Holy Spirit. The thing about it is that it doesn't translate the same to every culture. So what they eventually brought me to was an understanding that masters like Jesus and Buddha were saying pretty much the same thing. They were teaching pretty much the same thing, but they're given the teachings, in a way that will be translated to their culture. So it's kind of like it's put in a different way, but it's saying the same thing. Then what happens is that people take the message and they change it. That almost always happens. You can see that Jesus' message did not survive intact 2,000 years ago and was replaced by a religion. Because people always think that they know what the original person was talking about, even though they don't. And that was also true with Buddha and Krishna and Lao Tzu and all these great teachers through history. They're kind of like misinterpreted. But if you get back to the original message, which my teachers managed to do in the book, then you'll see that they're pretty much saying the same things and that it does always revolve around forgiveness. It's just that they may say it a little bit differently because every culture has different customs, ways of saying things. It's like, even today, it was very difficult to translate A Course in Miracles into French because they don't have a word for forgiveness. So it made it a little difficult, and they had to use the word pardon, which is problematic because when you pardon somebody, usually you're pardoning them for something that they really did. And what forgiveness, according to the Course and these other great teachers, the way that they understood it, you're not forgiving somebody because they really did something. You're forgiving somebody because they didn't really do anything, because they're your projection. You're the one who made them up in the first place. And that's a completely different way of looking at it. And that's the number one reason why so many of these great teachers were misunderstood. I mean, you could go all the way back to the Vedanta, thousands of years ago. And that was one of the early Vedic teachings. And that was meant to be purely non-dualistic, teaching that only reality is real and that the world of form is not real. And then, of course, immediately people took it, misinterpreted it, turned it into a dualistic teaching. And some people are doing that today with the Course of Miracles. They think because the Course talks about both the world of illusion and the world of truth, they think that both are true. And they don't really get that, no, only one of them is true. And only the truth is true and nothing else is true. And it's very difficult for people to get that. And that's why it explains, all the misinterpretations of all these great teachings throughout history.
And also a poignant reason why we have a tool of the workbook that's part of the course to really to train the mind from its propensity to want to think in terms of dualistic or duality.
Yeah, I think that even though the Course goes out of its way to describe both the ego and the Holy Spirit, the reason that it does that is because it wants you to know what it is you're choosing between. And that's a fundamental part of the text. And then the workbook trains your mind to get into the habit of thinking with the Holy Spirit, to choosing the Holy Spirit instead of the ego. And it's in that choice that your real power lies. At one point, the Course says that the power of decision is your one remaining power as a prisoner of this world. You can decide to see it right. You can decide to see it with the Holy Spirit instead of the ego, and it's a totally different way of looking at things, because the Holy Spirit has a totally different story about what it is you're seeing. The ego is going to say, hey, what you're seeing is true, and this is a real problem in a real world with real people, and you better do something about it or else you're in trouble. And the whole ego spiel about judgment and condemnation and making it real, because the ego likes this illusion and wants to keep it going, so it wants you to make it real. And then there's the Holy Spirit saying a totally different thing, which is actually what you're seeing is not real. It's not true. And instead of giving truth to your illusions, what you need to do is you need to give your illusions to the truth. You need to kind of like surrender your illusions to the Holy Spirit and instead take on what the Holy Spirit is telling you as the truth. And what the Holy Spirit would say is that people may think that they're bodies, they may think that they're separate, they may think that they're egos, but you should know better. With everything that I'm teaching you, you should know to just overlook the body and know what they really are in your mind. And what they really are is this perfect spirit, totally innocent, something that has never left heaven, something that is still perfectly one with God. That's the nothing real that can be threatened that the Course talks about at the beginning. What they really are is something that is immortal. It's invulnerable. It's something that can't be threatened by anything in this world, something that can't be touched by anything in this world, and that is their reality. And if you think about them that way in your mind, then eventually that is how you will come to experience yourself. It's just like the Course says, as you see him, you'll see yourself. And that's because of the way that the mind works, because the Course understands the way that the mind works. And it must be pretty important, because after the Course says, as you see him, you'll see yourself, it says, never forget this. It says, in that person, you'll either find yourself or lose yourself. So it's a pretty important aspect of the Course. When the Course says at the end, choose once again what you would have him be, knowing that every decision you make will establish your own identity as you will see it and believe that it is. Whatever you're thinking they are, your mind is going to interpret to mean that you are that thing. So if they're a body, you're a body. If they're guilty, you're guilty. But if they're not a body, as the Course tells us over and over, I am not a body, I am free, then that's how you'll experience yourself. If you're thinking they're innocent, that is how you will experience yourself. It's like you're deciding every instant of every day your own identity and what you believe you are, and even how you will feel. People have no idea how good they could feel. They could feel so good, it should be illegal. And it all comes from that one choice, which is either the Holy Spirit or the ego, and whichever one you choose will be what you think is real.
It's beautiful, Gary. Yeah, and I think the important thing for me to remember is that we're talking about everybody and everything under no circumstances, no matter what. How convincing! I mean, even this morning I woke up and my partner said something to me that I felt a charge, and I can see the charge come right up, and at the same time, I simultaneously look at this and say, "Wow!" I can feel the kind of the carrot in front of me to want to jump at this idea that there's actually something outside of me causing me to have that experience. But really what the Course is saying is there is nothing outside of us, and forgiveness is applicable to everything, and our only responsibility is to accept the atonement for ourselves. And that isn't always easy. It appears that way, at least, that it's not always easy.
Oh, that's true. And Craig, I was going to ask you, if you don't mind, since I haven't had the opportunity to see the movie yet, I was wondering if you could tell me just a little bit more about it, how to come out, how long is it, who's in it, that kind of thing.
Oh, great. Thank you, Gary, for asking. First of all, thank you for being so open and willing to do the movie. That was the first time I had met you, and we met and sat down. And your portion in the movie, you talked a lot about forgiveness, and what you shared in the movie for me, because the movie is in part me going through, the character of Craig going through his experience with the Course over the course of 3 years, and meeting with you and leaving the conversation. It was very clear, and it's kind of like what you just shared now, is that as we learn to forgive others and we learn to see others as spirit or as whole, we come to know our own innocence, and in overlooking errors of others, we overlook the errors in ourselves. By overlooking the limitation in others, we overlook the limitation ourselves. And for me, going through that time period, I was really dealing with the limitations of work and I don't know if you remember this, but I had shared with you at the time, I was at a work environment and I wasn't feeling inspired. And really what I wanted to do is what I'm doing right now. So here's the irony. I get to sit with you 3 years later after doing the movie to tell you that I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. And I wasn't able to say, and I wasn't able to tell you that at the interview because I was still applying Course principles to my life. And dealing with this limited self-concept of who I thought I was, rather than really following the inspiration. So that was your part in the movie. That is what comes through. There are 7 other teachers that are also in the movie, and they also played a part in this story of Craig kind of undoing some of the limitations in mind that Craig held about himself. So it's really a movie about following inspiration. And I remember when I was talking to you, Gary, you were sharing many stories, one of which was following your heart and making a move from Maine to the West Coast. I remember you shared. And you, as well as the other teachers, really served as symbols or testament to this idea that we can follow spirit regardless of circumstance, and follow our heart and know that we will be taken care of. So in the movie, that's exactly what this character does, is he eventually follows his heart and spirit, which is really being called in service of spirit, which is really being called to undo this self-concept. And I take no credit for it, and I really give spirit all the credit, because I really feel like there's nothing that I've been doing. And these days, I also even question my part in any of it, to the point where I can see like there's been a process, but yet I've had nothing to do with this process, and just a lot of gratitude in my heart. So the movie just lays out the story of following inspiration and really landing in a place where you realize happiness is here. And it's in doing this interview and celebrating A Course in Miracles right now, as I am with Gary, Renard, and whoever else is listening in.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. It really brings me back to when I first started trying to teach A Course in Miracles. When my first book came out, it was the spring of 2003, and I didn't want to speak to anybody. And I made up my mind, no, I'm not going to speak or anything. And I realized after a few months, because I didn't speak at all the first 6 months that the book was out. And then people were saying, Gary, people have questions about your book, and it might be helpful if you answered those questions. And I'm thinking, no, but eventually I did. And I was very, reluctant at first. And as time went on, I actually started to like it a bit. And then, go forward 12 years, here I am right now. I'm home in California, but 3 days ago, I got home from Taiwan, in China, and I'm there teaching the course last weekend in Taiwan. And I'm thinking to myself, how did I get here? You know, it's like from refusing to talk at all to teaching in Taiwan. And it's just, if you are willing to follow the Holy Spirit, and you have to be willing. You know, it's like the Course says, all are called, but few choose to listen. But if you're willing to do it, you can be led to some pretty amazing things. And they can be fun things. You know, it's like I tell people, it's okay to have a good time. You know, it's okay to, you know, have fun relationships and be normal and enjoy what you're doing. A Course in Miracles is not a suffering, sacrificial kind of a thing. You know, it's something that is happy. And one of the 10 characteristics of a teacher of God is joy. So it's okay to have fun and to have a good time. And I do have a good time. I enjoyed, you know, meeting all these great people, which is also a new thing for me, because I was never the kind of person who wanted to, you know, meet people. I remember at first I would, you know, hear the Course talking about relationships, and I would think, relationships, you know, I don't want relationships. You know, I hate people. You know, so it's like, what's all this relationship stuff? You know, but eventually I came around and I started to realize, well, you know, the forgiven relationship is the holy relationship. And eventually I got to travel all over. And I think that, ironically for me, one of the best parts of this whole process has been the great people that I've gotten to meet all over the world. And that would have surprised me. If you told me that 20 years ago, that I would end up actually enjoying meeting all these great people, well, that shows you how much you can change over time. And forgiveness does change you. It does undo the false you, the ego. And the more you undo the false you, the more the real you is left. And you don't have to do anything about the real you. You know, the real you is already perfect. The real you is already exactly the same as your source, already exactly the same as God. And you don't have to do anything about that. All that you have to do is undo the false you, and you'll start to experience the real you more and more. So it's very simple. And the only difficult part about it is that you got to do it. You know, the Course isn't a religion, doesn't have a lot of rules, but I think that there's an unwritten rule when it comes to forgiveness, and that is you got to do it. And if you do it, and if you really want the results of the Course, and the way that you show that you want the results is by doing it, you know, it's kind of like where it says about the words, I want the peace of God. It says that to say these words is nothing, but to mean these words is everything. And I think you show that you mean it with your practice. You know, if you actually practice forgiveness every day, that kind of like will get you to where you'll have the results of the Course. And if you don't really practice every day, then you don't really mean it. And it's just a hobby of yours, maybe an entertainment where you get to talk about the Course and show how smart you are and everything. And if you do it that way, it's not going to do you any good. The only way to get the results of the Course is to practice the kind of forgiveness that the Course is teaching.
Beautiful. Yeah, that constant willingness to be wrong about how you're saying things. And the other point that I thought was important to pause on is what you shared about you know, you don't have to forgive the good stuff. You know, it's like, I know for me in my experience, there was a time when I felt like everything was to be denounced as an illusion. So it's like, you know, the Course is an illusion. The you know, you know, the beautiful experience of being in a relationship is an illusion, or I shouldn't have this relationship because it's special and there's something wrong with it. And although the Course aims at bringing an awareness to how we use these relationships, the Course is not saying that those are going to be taken away from you and that there needs to be sacrifice in this path to awakening.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's actually one of the things in Asia that they're very confused about when it comes to the Course. I've been in Asia twice this year. I'm going back twice more this year. And that's one of the things that they have. They think that because it's an illusion, you have to forgive all the good things equally with all the bad things, or else you're not undoing duality. And that's really not the way that it is, and it's not the way that the Course works. You'll notice all throughout the Course that it doesn't focus on forgiving the good stuff. It doesn't focus on forgiving the good relationships. In fact, at one point, it says that if you're with somebody and there's nothing to forgive, then what you should do is celebrate. So that's another reason why I say that this is a happy form of spirituality. It doesn't try to take your relationships away from you. It simply has you look at them with the Holy Spirit instead of the ego. And if there's nothing to forgive, then you should celebrate. And if there is something to forgive, and when I say that, I mean the negative emotions. You notice that the Course focuses a lot on the deep, dark, egoic type emotions and feelings and thoughts that you have. It goes to great length to describe the ego, which some people don't like because it's very graphic. There are some places in the text that are almost scary, the way that the ego is described. And that's what the Course focuses on forgiving, is that deep, dark part of the mind that you can't see, but which you can see if you recognize that what you're seeing out there on the screen is just what the Course would call at the end of the text, the secret sins and hidden hates that you actually have about yourself, that you have chosen to see out there on the screen. And there's some pretty dark stuff described in the Course, and that's what we're being asked to forgive, is the stuff that we didn't know about ourselves, but that we can get in touch with simply by noticing it out there on the screen and forgiving it. And that's why the Course doesn't talk about forgiving the beautiful sunsets or the romantic walks on the beach or the art that you love. It focuses on noticing those times when you're being judgmental. And by being judgmental, I especially mean condemnation. If you're thinking negative thoughts in your mind about another person, that's what the Course focuses on, you catching, and it is a discipline. You have to catch yourself doing that. You have to catch yourself, whether it's thinking in a negative way, or you have to monitor your feelings too. What are you feeling like? Are you feeling bad? Well, if you're feeling bad, that's the ego. If you're feeling anxious or uncomfortable, or even starting to feel a little bit angry, that's the ego. And you need to catch yourself, and you need to stop that. That's really the first step in forgiveness, is you got to stop thinking with the ego. If you can do that, and that may be the hardest part, because we're so used to reacting. We're so used to getting our buttons pushed, and we want to go, you want to react. You want to go, and you got to stop yourself right there. And the sooner you do it, the less you'll suffer. And then you can take the second step, which is what the Course would call the holy instant. You can switch to the Holy Spirit. You can start thinking with the Holy Spirit instead of the ego. And the Holy Spirit has a totally different story about what's going on. And the Holy Spirit is saying, look, the reason that you're upset is because you're making this real. If you weren't making it real, you wouldn't be upset. It's like the Course says at one point, it says, you would not react at all to figures in a dream you knew that you were dreaming. He says, if you do, then you have failed to recognize that it is your dream. In other words, the dream isn't being dreamed by somebody else. This dream is being dreamed by you, and there isn't anybody else. So it's like, wow, you can stop yourself and realize that what you're reacting to isn't really there. It's nothing. I love the line in the Course that says, every response to the ego is a call to war. And war does deprive you of peace. Yet in this war, there's no opponent. There's nobody out there. We're reacting to something that we made up, and then we forgot that we made it up. We forgot that this is our projection. And if we remember, well, that's half the battle right there. The Course says, what is a miracle but this remembering? You remember the truth. You remember, there's not really anything out there, which means I can forgive people not because they've really done something. I don't have to make it real. I can remember that it's just a dream and there's no need to react to it. And if I can do that, if I can think right-minded thoughts with the Holy Spirit instead of the ego, Then eventually I can take the third step in forgiveness, and that is really spiritual sight. That is what the Course would call vision. At one point, it also refers to it as true perception. And at that point, you start to think of people differently. You stop thinking of them as being people, and you start thinking about them as being what they really are and where they really are, which is this perfect spirit. But the Course teaches that spirit is not a partial attribute. It's something that is not just part of it, it's something that is all of it. It's perfect oneness. The Holy Spirit thinks in terms of perfect oneness. At one point, the Course says, everywhere the Holy Spirit looks, he sees himself. The Holy Spirit sees perfect oneness and innocence everywhere. And if you do that in your mind, I'm not saying you're not still going to see bodies, you will, but it's your attitude. If you think that way in your mind, then that is how you will come to see yourself. So you have the power now to establish everything. You can establish what you believe you are by seeing it everywhere. You can even establish how you feel, how you feel about yourself. And that's a very powerful place to be coming from. Most people have no idea how good they could feel. And the Course really can change how you feel about yourself. And I think the irony of the whole thing is that you can still have your life, because the Course is done at the level of the mind. When the Course says this is a course in cause and not effect, it's teaching the mind is the level of cause. And what you're seeing out there on the screen is just an effect. It's kind of like being in a movie theater. Your attention has been diverted to the screen, and you forget that it's not real. You forget that what you're seeing out there on the screen isn't true. And you have to remember something. If you want to change what's on the screen, it's not going to do you much good to fool around with the screen. You have to remember that there's a projector, and it's what's in the projector that counts. And in this case, the projector is the mind. And the only way that you're going to change your experience of what's on the screen is if you change what's in your mind. And if you change what's in your mind, now you're dealing with the cause instead of just dealing with the effect. So that's why that is the focus of A Course in Miracles. It doesn't try to change the world. It doesn't try to change your life. It says, seek not to change the world. Seek rather to change your mind about the world. And if you do that, you're dealing with the cause instead of the effect. But the reason that's so great is because it changes your experience, and then you can get a whole different take on life. You can start seeing everything with the Holy Spirit instead of the ego, and start thinking of people as being what they really are and where they really are, which is perfect oneness. And if you do that, it will change your experience of everything.
It's beautiful. It's like, I love when you talked about the holy instant, that being that moment where there's a recognition. It's almost like you can see all that's been woven in the mind, the storyline, the ego's thought system. That you can see that in that holy instant, and you can see which way do you want to go. Are you going to buy into this, stream of thinking that is going to keep you in a state of separateness? Or are you going to allow yourself to just be in the moment where salvation always is and always is available to us? Us being spirit, and the fact that you mentioned, we're talking about wholeness. We're talking about everything. So it's not, when we say we're leaning to spirit or wanting to see with spirit, it's not something outside of us, nor is it a concept in our mind. It is something right here that we have at our disposal, provided the obscurities, that we're willing to give up the obscurities of what gets in the way.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And I just wanted to kind of let people know that there's more than one way to teach the Course. The Course says that to teach is to demonstrate. So you demonstrate that you teach is true with your forgiveness and with your attitude. And because every mind is joined, because there's really just one mind, because every mind is joined, the Course says that the simple presence of a teacher of God acts as a reminder. So you don't have to teach the course in a traditional way if you don't want to, if you don't feel guided to. I did feel guided to, but I know that the real course is done at the level of the mind, and that my real job is forgiveness. In fact, my teacher said that to me in the first book. He said, you know, your real job is forgiveness, and everything else is just your cover job. You know, and you may choose to teach the course in a traditional way if you feel guided to do so by the Holy Spirit. The course does say that the body can be used as a communication tool for the Holy Spirit. And you can choose to teach it in a more traditional way and get up in front of people, or to do you know, the thing that you've done, which is make a film, which is a great idea. Whatever way you feel guided to do it by the Holy Spirit, that's the key. I tell people, don't do it alone, whatever you do, because if you do things on your own, then you're actually reinforcing the idea of separation in your mind, and you don't even know that you're doing that. But your unconscious mind catches on to that. But if you're always doing things with the Holy Spirit, then you're actually undoing the idea of separation in your mind, and you're becoming more whole. So that's the main thing. You know, practice forgiveness and do everything with the Holy Spirit. I like to put the Holy Spirit in charge of my day every morning. And you don't have to make a big deal out of it. Just say, hey, you're in charge. You know, Holy Spirit, you be in charge of my mind. You be in charge of my thoughts. And the Course teaches, you know, you don't have to worry about too much about what you do, because what you do is just a result of what you think. So the Course focuses really on the thoughts that you're having in the mind, and it knows that the rest will take care of itself. And that if you're doing the Course, and if you get used to working with the Holy Spirit, then even if you don't have time to ask, you know, like let's say that an emergency comes up and you have to deal with it. Well, at that point, the Manual for Teachers says that wisdom will be given to you when you need it. You know, so if a situation comes up, you will just know automatically what you should do, because you've gotten so used to working with the Holy Spirit that, you know, the Holy Spirit is kind of like guiding you as you go along, whether you have time to ask or not. And, you know, it doesn't take too long to ask the Holy Spirit to be in charge of your day. Like I was in a hurry this past weekend. I was late getting out of the hotel room, so I didn't have time to, you know, sit down and meditate for 5 minutes and put the Holy Spirit in charge. So it just says, hey Jesus, you and me, right? And that's it. That's all it takes. You know, the Course says that you can join with God in just an instant. So you don't have to have big rituals. I used to meditate for like an hour and a half a day back before I started doing the Course. Today, if I have time, I may become silent for like 5 minutes and join with the Holy Spirit and get into the habit of being in spirit, which is where inspiration comes from. And it's like the more you get in the habit of being with spirit, the more spirit is in the habit of being with you.
Beautiful. You talked a little bit about you know, different ways of teaching, and I know one of the projects that you are a part of is the TV series starring your teachers, Arten and Pursah. I'd love to get an update and find out like what's unfolding. How can people who are watching help or be a part of whatever's happening if it's in the works?
Well, yeah, I just moved out here. I think it's been 8 years now, and I never thought that I would move away from New England. And you know, you just never know what's around the corner. You know, I try to encourage people. I tell them, look, you never know what great thing could be right around the corner for you. And if you work with the Holy Spirit will guide you to do some pretty good things. And I must say that being in Hollywood has been a real forgiveness opportunity for me, just like everything else, because I didn't understand what the real purpose of Hollywood was until I got out here. And then I learned that the real purpose of Hollywood is to drive you crazy. And if you understand that, then you'll know what everything is for, and you'll understand that it's all about forgiveness. Now, getting the Disappearance of the Universe made into a TV series has been a real forgiveness opportunity. It's been a tough one, because we're not exactly saying what traditional Hollywood wants to hear. I mean, if I gave Arten and Pursah guns and, haven't had a shootout with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, then, that would be an easy sell. But this is a little bit different. Now, fortunately, I have met very good people along the way who want to help. And that has resulted in us making some progress. In the spring, I signed a contract with a production company, and we're developing the show a little bit further, because I was stunned to find out that they actually had a few good ideas. And so we're kind of like making it even more interesting without changing the message. One of the things you have to remember about the course is it says that a good translator changes the form without changing the meaning. So it's okay to experiment with the form. For example, we could start the show off 100 years in the future, 100 years from now in Chicago, and start it off with Arten and Pursah, and then kind of like go backwards in time. Instead of making it linear, go backwards in time. Then maybe the first season is mostly about them, the second season is mostly about this time period, which could be any time in my life. And then maybe the third season, go back to the time of Jesus, 2,000 years ago. And every time you go back one step, you can include everything. So the first season is about one time period. The second season is more about two time periods. Third season, more about three. Fourth season, we could include, Cahokia, the Great American Indian settlement. And the fifth season, you could put them all together. It's kind of like we have enough material to do that and to present it, I think, in a way that keeps the message intact without changing the message. But yeah, you can mess around with the form and make it entertaining, which is what my books do. I think it takes a difficult message and makes it more approachable and makes it entertaining and puts it in a way that people can actually understand and apply to their lives if they choose to. And it seems to be going that way with the TV series. It's been a long, difficult process. At first, nobody wanted to hear about it. I remember when I first got going with this, and we really got going with this in earnest, I'd say about 5 years ago. And the first producer who I talked to, he looked at me and he said, "Gary, there's no room on television for this kind of material." And I thought, wow, thanks. Yeah, no room on television, for this kind of material. Now, one of the fortunate things is that on television, you get more and more venues all the time. There are more and more things and ways of expressing becoming available, more networks, more channels, more people making TV series from Netflix to Amazon to just all kinds of good things happening. And they are looking for content. And the people that I've come into contact with, they're good at what they do. So it's, I think, a lot more possible now that this will actually happen than it ever has been before. So I think that just like with anything, whether it's this or whether it's A Course in Miracles, if you really want to get very good at practicing forgiveness, if there's one quality that I think is important, it's the quality of perseverance, sticking with it, of never giving up. Hollywood is full of stories of people who were just about to give up and they've been trying for 10 years. And then all of a sudden something happened and everything just took off for them. So you never know. And then on top of that, as the Course says, the script is written. Those who are to meet shall meet. And all the people that I've gotten to meet here are people who I was supposed to meet. Some of them have become friends. Some of them have become co-workers, or both. The very first workshop I did after I moved out here was at UCLA. And I met this fledgling TV producer named Alicia, and we became friends. And we started working on this project 2 years later. And, it's been 5 years now, and a couple of other people have come into it. And, a lot of it is just about who you meet along the way. And do you forgive that relationship? And maybe there's nothing to be forgiven, but if there is, and if you do, that's the holy relationship. Always remember, if you forgive something, if you really forgive somebody completely, that is the holy relationship. And that's what it's for. And then everything else that you do, if you're doing it with the Holy Spirit, can be an expression of spirit. It can be an expression of love. But the most important thing will always come back to reminding yourself, have I really forgiven this person or not?
Awesome. Awesome. We have about 8 minutes left. So I wanted to just, first of all, share with everyone that I will be going on tour with my movie in a couple of weeks, starting in Los Angeles. And if they want to find out more, they can go to acimdocumentary.com, and I will be sharing. What's on your tour schedule, Gary? Can you share a little bit? I know you said you were heading out to Asia pretty frequently. Do you have anything in the States or anything else coming up that we can look out for?
Yeah, it's fun because, sometimes Cindy and I like to do these little junkets, we call them, here in California. So tomorrow we're driving to La Jolla, and we're going to do a workshop at a hotel, just, not a huge gathering, but a nice little workshop in a hotel in La Jolla, and hang out there for the weekend. And a couple of friends are coming, and it'll be fun. And then we do some bigger events, like in 3 weeks we're going to South Korea, to Seoul for the first time. And we're excited about that. It's sold out, which is really exciting because to me, I see A Course in Miracles kind of like starting to take off in Asia. And I've already been to China twice this year. We'll go back again in November. This will be our first time in Seoul. We'll probably go back to Japan next year. And I see the Course, really starting to get a foothold in Asia, and it's relatively new there. It's only been on the mainland of China for 3 years. My first book
is it open? Is this something they openly participate in, or is following the Course something quite kind of hidden in China, or these seemingly suppressed societies? I don't know. I've never been, but that's what I think.
Yeah, China has changed dramatically in the last 10 years. Even more so in the last 5 years. And it seems like the only purpose of the Communist Party in China is to stay in power. And it's like they don't do anything else. They don't have any message. They don't have any philosophy. China has become completely capitalistic. I was really surprised when I went to Beijing and Shanghai. It was like going to Tokyo. And very little difference. They're really into money now. Their stock markets are getting big. They want to participate more in the world trade and have their currency be one of the reserve currencies. And they're really opening up. And there are really only two things that you can't talk about and that you can't do on mainland China. You can't criticize the government. You cannot criticize the party. So most people don't talk about them. And you can't support the Dalai Lama because the government in China is very afraid of the Dalai Lama, and they're afraid he's going to come back and take back Tibet. I don't know how they can possibly think that when he doesn't have an army, but they got that in their mind. But if you don't criticize the government, and as long as you're not doing something disruptive, then China has gotten to the point where you can talk about pretty much anything else. So this great translator of A Course in Miracles into Chinese, her name is Chaolin Caban. She translated the Course. She also translated my books into Chinese, both the kind of Chinese that they speak in Taiwan and Hong Kong, which is called traditional Chinese, and the kind of Chinese that they speak on the mainland, which is called simplified Chinese, because Mao wanted to change everything. He didn't want his people speaking the same Chinese as Chiang Kai-shek's people. So it's really hysterical, but that's why there are two different kinds of Chinese. And she really persevered. You talk about perseverance. She spent years of her life trying to get A Course in Miracles onto mainland China. And she finally convinced them that it was not a threat to the government. And they got that eventually, and then she translated my books into Chinese. It had already been out in Taiwan and Hong Kong for a few years, but it just got out on the mainland about 2 years ago. And when we were there in the spring, we found out that we could talk about pretty much anything we wanted to. There was somebody shooting a documentary there, and we shot openly, and there's no problem. And as long as you don't, criticize the government, then you're okay. And I don't have any reason to criticize the government because I'm not interested in their government. As far as I can see, as I said earlier here, the government is almost irrelevant there, except for staying in power and running a few things and punishing the people they don't like. For the most part, China has become free and capitalistic.
Wow. And ironically, you had just mentioned moments ago this idea of translating and the being able to translate using a different form but still carry the same meaning. Does that still happen for you when you're in these foreign countries? Are you able to, with the different form, convey the same meaning?
Yeah, I think it is possible. Of course, some of the translators who I work with are better than others. It's like any other profession. Some are excellent, some not so excellent. But I think that for the most part, the people who have translated the course into different languages have done a great job because they were trained by Ken Wapnick to make sure that they were consistent. And so they've done a good job, which means the people get off on a good start. And then when I go there, if I have a good translator, they really get what I'm saying. I didn't have a very good translator at times, but English is a very widely spoken language, so some people can understand English even if they can't speak it. And I found that between me speaking English and the translator speaking their language, between those two things, the message does get out there. So they do understand it.
Awesome. Well, we're about to wind down. I also wanted to just make sure that everybody knew that Gary Renard will be with us at the Miracle Share virtual conference coming up October 16th, 17th, and 18th. And we will be talking about the workbook, Awakening with the workbook from A Course in Miracles. Gary, thank you so much for being here and joining me for this hangout. I really appreciate the time that you're taking, especially coming after a big trip from China, and we look forward to your next book and the continuation of your extension of miracles and sharing.
Well, thank you for having me, and you don't have to worry about me. I have a permanent jet lag, so I'm just jet lagged all the time. And I don't feel it anymore. But if anybody wants to know where I'm going to be, they can always just go to GaryRenard.com. And there's a link in the upper left-hand corner says appearances. And that always has my schedule, which is always updated.
Beautiful. And also, as one of the listeners just reminded me, you can also find Gary in the documentary that I will be releasing soon. It will be released October 16th. You can join me on the tour for screening, or you can pre-order it online at acimdocumentary.com.
Great.
Thank you, Gary. Until next time, I'm pretty confident, sure that I will see you, and there will be another next time that you and I get to celebrate A Course in Miracles and waking up. So thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Craig. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.